Stephen, always appreciate it. So good to see you. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Dana. Great to be with you.
Am I being hard on Jake Sullivan here? Because I just feel like we're starting at a point that is very well after the virus and IP theft and all of China's other aggression, that if they decide to get involved and give any kind of assistance to Russia at all whatsoever, then they're going to be hit. They would be hit by the United States or quasi-NATO reaction as well. I think that people are sold against them already because of everything that's happened in the past 2 years plus.
Yeah, well, Jake's had a front row seat to this Obama-Biden magic formula that gave up a chunk of the Ukraine to Russia before, gave up a bunch of cash to Iran before, and went up to Anchorage, Alaska, and got barked at in BLM language by Chinese diplomats. And so basically, I think he's a pretty good source to go to for a voice of deterrence against bad people, because he clearly has had his way with them over the last decade or so of these august meetings he's been a part of. But this is pure fiction he's selling on the airwaves about some sense of deterrence. Number one, what are these crippling sanctions? I mean, after all, we're allowing their pipeline to go forward. The Germans are very dedicated to keeping that economic relationship going.
I have to ask you really quickly, because I saw it tweeted out that Germany and the United States are lockstep in the way that they're approaching the situation with Russia. I don't see that.
No, I think they might be in lockstep into the next meeting, just sort of frog marching from meeting to meeting to meeting. That's definitely not simpatico when it comes to what our vision for national interest is here. We've talked repeatedly about this. It's a major test for Europe. And Europe is clearly falling short. And the only thing that's making Europe look better is the weak verbiage coming out of the Biden White House.
Yeah.
And so I think it's a bad time for deterrence.
Here's what I'm confused about, and I think others are as well. We're talking to our friend Stephen Yates. I keep hearing these headlines out. U.S. intelligence says that Russia is going to invade and any time now. And I think it was Ned Price this morning. Heard him say that it could be in 2 days, it could be in 2 weeks. We just don't know, but it's going to happen. I mean, they are selling people on the fact that an invasion by Russia into Ukraine is absolutely going to happen any second. Thousands are going to die. I think Ned Price said you could have 50,000 fatalities. But then to hear Ukraine tell it, they say that the United States is being hysterical and that isn't what is going to happen. Why is there this major disconnect? I mean, why is it that the United States is saying that Ukraine's going to be invaded and Ukraine's like, wait a minute, hold up. Can you guys calm down? I'm so confused by this.
Well, we have every reason to be confused, but I think what it is the complete takeover of our national security policymaking by people who only really work in crisis communications. And so anyone who's run for office or worked in PR, they'd say, get out there and manage expectations. Whatever your opponent's going to try to hit you with, you go out there and you say it first. And that way, when it happens, you can tell people, I told you so, and you look smart for predicting the future. And instead, they're not distracted by, well, wait a minute. You predicted that they were going to hurt your interests, and now they have, and you call that a win? This is no way to run a country. It's no way to project power. It's no way to deter. Instead of being a passive analyst trying to predict the future, our policymakers and leaders should be saying, you shouldn't do this, or here are going to be the very real ways that pain and consequence will come to you. We should privately be saying things that are very reliable, verifiable, and even scarier, so that the public part is actually nicer. But, we just don't have people who seem to understand real power and real consequence. And so they're just trying to manage the media cycle so that they don't take more hits on the Sunday shows.
That's actually a really good point. We're talking with Stephen Yates about the whole situation. We're going to look at China here in a minute. He's with the America First Policy Institute. That their background's in crisis management. If they just keep pushing that, then at some point they'll be right. And then they'll look smart. And then that's all that anyone will ever remember. I'm sure that you have not been watching the Squid Games. I haven't been watching the Squid Games in China either. I saw a story of a 19-year-old U.S.-born Olympic figure skater who went to compete for China, and then she renounced her U.S. citizenship, which apparently China requires, went to go compete with China and then fell twice during some short, I don't know, some program. And all of China apparently has been making fun of her, saying that she doesn't even deserve to represent China. This coupled with it, apparently they brought out Peng Shui. I was looking at a photo, a very awkward photo, where she always has somebody watching her. Apparently, in any interview, there was a guy who is in the mirror, his reflection. Nobody knows who this dude is. He's just standing in the background watching the skier. Very careful and orchestrated in her remarks. And then the Samantha Guthrie audio from last week, where she said, "Look, they have one of the Uyghurs lighting the flame, the Olympic flame. Well, now that Uyghur has disappeared, probably to a place that rhymes with schmamp." I just wanted to get your kind of initial thoughts on the first week of the Squid Games, Stephen.
Well, the only, I think, glass half full part of it to me is that it seems to be among the most poorly watched, poorly rated broadcasts of an Olympics opening ceremony in the modern era. That's cool. There's, I
Spoken
think
like
the
a true
fact
Gen Xer.
that the ad that Congressman Waltz of Florida put out,
Yeah.
that Ennis Cantor participated in, and they wouldn't run the ad. I think that did more to circulate the ad than if they would have actually run it. So again, good for them. I'd like to think that a lot of the world is kind of dialing into the fact that we don't want this sham. I mean, they poisoned the world. They killed a lot of people. The people of the world freaked out and just destroyed 2 years of education for our youth by separation, remote learning, masks, distancing, and all kinds of stuff. And now they're going to the most tightly controlled sort of Potemkin village that's ever existed for a games. I mean, if this, the one word this shouldn't cover is games. This doesn't look fun at all. People aren't eating right. There's no crowd to cheer. People are testing positive to COVID, getting yanked out. I mean, this is not fun.
I hope I wish this was the end of the Olympics. I'm done with it. And I had on, and with all due respect to Senator Ron Johnson, I know I agree with him on a lot of stuff, but he said this, he made the remark to me, he said, well, we shouldn't politicize it to the point where, we punish these athletes. These athletes have worked really, really hard to go and compete. And I thought, the prisoners in these camps in Xinjiang have worked really, really hard as well to not die. I think some of these athletes have worked really, really hard, like Peng Shui, to also not get killed after she's apparently sexually assaulted by the second in command of the CCP. There are millions of people that work really, really hard to stay healthy and not go crazy when they lost their incomes and had to shut everything down because of what China did after they released this virus. That to me is a weird take.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was politicized when the International Olympic Committee, which doesn't look too highbrow to me in its judgment, chose to have the games hosted in a country that, yes, is engaged in a current genocide that before our eyes wiped out one of the freest parts of the planet in Hong Kong and is threatening a neighbor in Taiwan. And that's just the beginning of the list. So why would you even consider doing that? After they had gone through the experience of delaying for a year the Tokyo Games, why didn't they just delay this for a year and spend that time finding a non-genocidal location for the games?
That's a great
Wouldn't
point.
Be a hard homework task. And so I don't really think it's people who are pointing out the travesties of the reality of China. They're politicizing things. I actually think if we really cared about our athletes, we wouldn't be sending them to the Squid Games. We wouldn't be sending them to eat weird food and come into contact with probably the most Omicron vulnerable population on the earth because the Chinese people haven't built up natural immunity from this.
That's a really good point. Last question, talking with our friend Stephen Yates. You can find him at AmericanFirstPolicy.com. I kind of get the idea that China was sort of using the Olympics. I know it's been described as a coronation ceremony of sorts for Xi Jinping, but I kind of think that they were using it as a way to sort of gauge world reaction and to see if this was the right moment to move on Taiwan or not, or when the right moment would be based on the reaction of the world to the games. What is your thought on that?
Well, I certainly think that it's a Xi Jinping measure of the standing of his strength and his regime's standing. How much can they kind of get away with in the world? I mean, if they got away with being able to host these games, and no real price to reputation for unleashing a virus on the world, for building concentration camps, for stamping out political freedom, and messing with supply chains when people really need help. And just go down the list. If they can then just put a smile on, and the titans of industry and entertainment come and basically kiss the emperor's ring, that's a real measure of their standing and the weakness of the world. The fact that it's not been as easygoing this time for them is somewhat heartening to me. It still should never have happened from my point of view, but the fact that they're having to work for it is just at least a modest step in the right direction this time around.
I couldn't agree more. Our friend Stephen Yates at YatesComms on Twitter. Stephen, always appreciate your perspective. Thank you, my friend. Well, it's good to talk with you.
Thank you, Dana. Take care.